for the Fall 2020 Student Town Hall. I'm Joshua Padilla, president of CSUN. Today's forum is an opportunity for UNLV leadership to provide important updates to the campus community. We received more than 100 questions through an online submission process. During this town hall, we will work through as many of those questions as time allows. Before we get started with those questions, however, a few members of the administration would like to provide updates, and the first is President Keith Whitfield. Dr. Whitfield, thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Joshua, and hello everyone out there in, I was going to say in TV land, but you all may not be old enough to remember that kind of adage. It's great to be here with you today. I just wanted to take a very quick second and put an emphasis on what all of us are thinking about, particularly as we move towards the Thanksgiving holiday. And in the times that we live in now, as we've seen the governor really try to encourage us to be stricter in terms of our health practices. I really want to double down that you guys have been doing a fantastic job, absolutely fantastic job. We're not at zero cases, but we are not as bad as some of the places even around us. Now, we know that you go back out into that community, and I think that the model that you set, the behaviors that you do, have an impact. And so please, please keep doing what you're doing. The other piece that I would say about that is that as Thanksgiving comes around, be a leader within your family. And if you have an older grandparent or an older parent, make sure that you think about their safety. If you have somebody who has risk factors, make sure that you think about their safety and try to increase wearing those masks and maybe do a little social distancing, doing some creative things like even if you're not going to have family here, doing it via Zoom to have a Thanksgiving dinner. It's something that has an impact that is going to really help our overall health as a community. I also wanted to continue to encourage you all to stay strong. I know that doing courses in a remote fashion is not the most preferable way that you might want to do them. Although I have heard from some students, hey, it's not bad. I think the problem is that we get stuck at home, but remote does offer this other opportunity of flexibility. But I want you all to stay strong and stay persistent towards earning your degree by amassing those credits each semester. It is critically important for you to do. Please don't get discouraged by our current circumstances. And I put emphasis on current. This is not going to be forever. We've just got to make sure we hang tough and we get through these times, and we will see another side. I did also want to lastly share with you, I wanted to thank all of those who took time out and participated in my listening tour. I think I learned so much from having those conversations, and I mean, it covered everything. And I think that you all really gave me a good kind of jump start on learning our university, even without you all being here. And you're going to see that be in some of the plans that we're going to talk about in the very early spring. I'm taking some time now. Actually, this week is the last week of the listening tour. So we'll take and actually have a summary of all of that, and we'll be passing it out to you all so that you can see not only the ones maybe that you participated in, or if you didn't get to participate, you'll see some of the conversations and some of the issues that were raised. There's a lot of them. We're going to try to compact them and create some priorities. And in the, let's call it relatively early spring, I'll be sharing with you some of my thoughts based on those conversations about how we're going to go forward, and we're going to do even greater things as a university. So with that, thank you very much, Josh.
And I just want to say a quick hello. My name is Chris Heavey, and I am honored to be the Executive Vice President and Provost, working with President Whitfield to help lead UNLV. I just want to echo what he said of saying, hang in there and stay strong. I had the honor of speaking at many new student orientations before the time of this pandemic, when I stood up in front of you and said that the reason this university exists is to help you build that platform for the future that you want. And none of the pandemic or the conditions under which we're having to operate now has changed any of that. We are here to help you get the education and the experiences and the skills that you need and want for your future. So like President Whitfield said, we really urge you to hang in there. That degree is going to be just as valuable after this pandemic as it was before the pandemic. And so we really hope we don't lose any of you along the way because of difficulties. That being said, we know it's a tough time. We know it's hard to get through this. We're proud of how you've helped us respond as a campus, and we've been able to operate very safely. So the plan that we put in place has worked out pretty well, and we really haven't had to make any major adjustments in our operations like some campuses did that tried to go back to a more fully in-person operating environment. We're sorry that we can't be with you more in person, but we do think it's the safest way to operate now. And just want to pass on a small piece of good news. The normal university operations also go on during this pandemic. And one of the things that we did this fall, President Whitfield and I worked with our team to go through our mid-cycle accreditation for the entire university. And we got a stellar review as a university for how we're operating, for the quality of our academic programs, and even for our response to this pandemic. And we know that that's entirely a team effort, including all of you as students. And so thank you for being here. We're proud of you. We're proud of you hanging in there. And we urge you to stick with it, like the president said, so we can get through this together. And we're all looking forward to all the things that we'll be able to do when we get past this pandemic. So with that, I want to just hand it over to our dear colleague and friend, our Vice President for Student Affairs, Dr. Juanita Fain.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome. And again, just to reiterate how appreciative we are of how you've hung in there. We want you to know we are very concerned about your well-being, both your physical and your mental well-being. And one of the things we've done is we have what we call How We Can Help link, and that's on the coronavirus website. And if you have any kind of concern at all, whether it's financial, academic, if you complete that form, we will make sure that your questions and your concerns get answered. So again, it's called the How Can We Help link. Also, I wanted to mention, we understand that during this time, as strong as you all have been, and we really appreciate that there may be some mental health concerns. And so we are expanding our mental health resources. We are, our counseling and psychological services is working with local providers to provide additional services to you. And we will also be updating our website to indicate other mental health resources that might be available. And then finally, I wanted to mention that if you are in a situation where you have an issue, if you're renting and you have landlords and you have concern about paying your rent, CDC has a temporary halt of evictions, and that also is on the information about that is on the Corona's website under announcements. And I would encourage you that if you have some concerns regarding that matter, that you take advantage of the opportunity to complete that form as well. So again, thank you for being here and for hanging in there. And so with that, I'll hand it over to our colleague, Brian Labus, Dr. Brian Labus.
No, maybe your headset, Brian. Is it on your sound on your headset?
Let's just move down to Steve McKellips while Brian works out his technical stuff, and we'll come back to him.
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Steve McKellips. I'm the Associate Vice President for Enrollment and Student Services. And I want to speak a little bit about financial aid, the office, and the processes that our students have been going through with regard to that unit. I'll be honest and tell you the best place to start is an apology. To be perfectly candid, this has not been a very good financial aid experience for our students and our staff going through. There's a lot of remorse and a lot of regret for the way this has all been going down. But I wanted to make sure that I was honest and told everybody that we were aware of the fact that this has been a tough semester for us and we're making some improvements. It would not be enough to stand here and tell everybody that we're making improvements without recognizing that we understand this has been an opportunity through which the students who have had to have delays incurred some trouble and some problems, that these particular impacts were greater and larger than the processing themselves. They involved real life, and for that I apologize. That said, there's some good news to talk about on the horizon. We've been spending countless hours over the last many months trying to improve those services for the time frame going going forward. We have a really good handle on our abilities to process the aid starting as early as the next academic year, which sounds like it's really far away. But the financial aid application for next year opened a little over a month ago. So we are in a position where we're opportunistic about our abilities to serve our financial aid community of students much more successfully moving forward. But I didn't feel it appropriate to start with that information. I think it's important to tell people that we do understand and we empathize and we're doing the best we can. You certainly have my most sincere apology for the circumstances that you've had to endure. But I wanted to make sure that folks knew that they could contact me directly if there are students who have needs or problems with regard to their financial aid. Please come to me and let me see if there are ways in which I can help you. I know that you've been very patient with us going forward, or for the time frame so far, and so it's fair that you receive that same service back. So again, my apologies. Look forward to moving forward into a better year going into the new academic year and through the spring. Thank you very much.
Cool. With that, we're going to have Rich Clark introduce himself.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Clark. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Student Services. And so the offices I work with are student housing, maintenance, and then our campus life technology areas. And just a couple of things about our student housing area. We continue to look at the health and safety of our students literally on a daily basis with our maintenance and custodial teams doing regular cleaning in all public areas, as well as having hand sanitizer stations and barriers and things like that in place. We take that very seriously. And the good news is we've had very few cases, and the cases we have had in the residence halls, I'm very happy to report our students have done very well with their recovery. So, and I think that goes to a lot of teamwork by the various offices on campus and even some of the doctors and nurses that we work with. We just hosted a shot clinic, as a matter of fact, a few weeks ago for the flu shot, and we'll be hosting another clinic in the spring. The other thing, too, is just recognizing that I think the housing staff has done a fantastic job with trying to program to students in a very different time when we can't get together in large groups. But I know our Residence Hall Association, our National Residence Hall Association, I think they've done a fantastic job of providing ways to at least stay in contact with other residents beyond doing large group events. And then, of course, I think many of you have also seen the recommendation for students, if they can, to stay home and continue their studies after Thanksgiving and to move out at Thanksgiving, knowing that they'll return in the spring to live with us. And so there's been a number of questions that have come up regarding that recommendation. One is if a student does choose to move out at Thanksgiving, we are going to prorate their room and their board for the remainder of the fall semester to help them out financially. And then also just to make that clear to everyone that is something we'll do. Now, for those students that don't have the ability to stay home after Thanksgiving or need a place to come back to, we're going to be here to welcome you. Dining will be here to welcome you as well. We'll still have food service. And then for those students that need a place to stay during winter break, which is after December 10th through January 14th, we'll have an opportunity to assist you with housing during that winter break period as well. So I wanted to put that out there. And again, encourage you to do the same thing I think everyone else has done. Please stay safe, wear your mask, continue the social distancing, wash your hands. If there's anything that I can do or any member of my team can do to assist you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for that. With that being said, we're going to go to Mary Whitehead for a few remarks as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Mary Whitehead. I am the Director for Student Diversity and Social Justice. And as all my colleagues have stated, your voice has been heard, and we appreciate you letting us know your feedback and your experiences. I do want to mention that, historically, students have been at the forefront of many movements and change across the world. You are facing many social justice issues. When it comes to student engagement and justice, you have shown your hard work towards justice. You have demonstrated that your voice matters with great impact. Understand that you might feel like your single voice is small, but understand that it is truly mighty. Much of the work through the years have been led by students like you, and you have set the tone for equity and inclusion. You have expressed every possible emotion, developed strategies, built capacity, and empowered others through collective purpose. We are proud to know our student population is revisiting what solidarity and justice means. You are the folks that reimagine well-being and the importance of giving flexibility and grace. You remind us just how powerful your voice is and the many layers of yourself, reminding us that you're not one-dimensional, but you exist with multiple identities. Your involvement with addressing social justice issues and centering self-care does not go unnoticed. Again, thank you so much for continuing to be involved on campus in the Las Vegas community and taking care of yourself. Always feel free to reach out to Student Diversity and Social Justice, as well as other colleagues across campus. We want to hear you, and we want to make sure that we're providing an inclusive environment for you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Dr. Whitehead. We're going to bring it back to Dr. Labus and see if those audio issues have been fixed.
I think we're good now, so hopefully you can hear me. Unfortunately, all the news we hear about COVID in Nevada is bad. We talk about where we're at with the pandemic, and right now Nevada is higher than it has been the entire time that we've been dealing with this. Clark County is a little bit lower. They're having a lot bigger problems in the northern part of the state. But I think the part that doesn't come across most of the time is what's really happening on campus. We have our COVID dashboard. That is up to the minute updated. Every time we get a case reported, as soon as we enter it in our system, that's live. So you can see exactly where we're at week to week. I think the important thing to note from it, though, is that we are at about half of the expected cases we have for a population our size. So we look at the data from the health district, and we're not seeing cases on campus. We're not seeing clusters. We're not seeing problems where there's one individual location. We do investigate every single case to identify that, but we've been very fortunate that our efforts have paid off. We've used the science and the data to drive our approach. We've done everything we need to do to stop transmission on campus, and I would say that we've been successful. So I think that's something we should celebrate. We also can't back off on it at this point. We need to keep going with it, but we've done a good job of dealing with COVID on campus, and I'm really proud of the way everybody on campus has worked to keep us all safe.
Thank you for that. Thank you to all the presenters for your introduction and remarks. With those kind of being out of the way, we're going to dive into the questions. The questions are in 4 sections, the first one being academics and online instruction, second, response to COVID-19, the third, fees, financial aid, and accommodations, and the fourth being campus safety and social justice. With that being said, let's dive into the first one. This question is for Provost Heavey, and this was by far the most frequently submitted question. What will it take for UNLV to approve SU grading?
Well, thank you for that question, Joshua. And I also want to thank you. I know we all really appreciate you being here and your leadership of student government, as well as Nicole being here today. We heard the feedback loud and clear at the Board of Regents meeting last week, and President Whitfield and I have had multiple conversations about offering SU options for students this semester. And so we have decided that we will offer students the opportunity to request a limited number of satisfactory, unsatisfactory grades for current courses. President Whitfield will be talking with the other presidents in the system tomorrow before we finalize that, but hopefully we'll have an announcement out about that issue by maybe Friday or Monday of next week, specifying the details of the process. We expect there to be mandatory advising required, as there was during last spring and summer. And again, there would be a limited number of times that students could use that option, but we do expect students to be able to have it for some of their classes. And President Whitfield, do you want to add anything related to that?
No, Provost Heavey, I think that you covered it exactly. That first and foremost, we did hear from you. We do understand what kind of situation and time that this is, and that that it just be appropriate that we be able to provide some opportunity for that particular grading. Provost Heavey did provide me, we really wanted to think about this very hard and thoroughly, and he actually provided me with some data. I think Brent Drank provided it. That was looking, and not a whole lot of people used it, but I think for the people that used it, it was probably really important. And so I think to just second what he said of that, we have heard you, and it's another way in which we're trying to figure out ways to be able to help you.
Thank you for that answer, Provost Heavey and President Whitfield. Moving on to the next question. This question is also directed at Provost Heavey. Can you address what's being done to improve online instruction? Students have complained about long wait times to receive grades, professors who do not provide engaging instruction, student burnout, increased homework and course rigor, requirements to purchase certain software and hardware, What recourse do students have if they believe a professor is not performing adequately?
Yes, thank you again for that important question. We recognize that for many instructors, and hopefully it's a diminishing number, that the transition to remote instruction was not easy because it's something they weren't familiar with. And so we have, we stood up a bunch of training over the summer for faculty and staff to learn how to be effective in teaching online classes. And many instructors took advantage of that over the summer to try to increase the quality of their offerings. President Whitfield and I have also repeatedly, and including again after the Board of Regents meeting, hearing some of those comments on Friday, over the weekend, wrote to all of our deans to encourage them to speak to all their faculty to make sure that they're being responsive to students, because one of the things we know is that that's what students want, is the interactions with the faculty. That's why students come to universities, because of the expertise and the experiences they have with faculty. And we're trying to make sure that the faculty all lean into the challenge of this new mode of instruction. You know, again, some of them not being comfortable with it. We also provided mentoring opportunities. So for faculty who weren't familiar with remote instruction, we offered them the ability to get a mentor who was skilled in the area. And we actually paid a small stipend to the mentor. And we had definitely dozens of faculty take advantage of that opportunity to be mentored in those classes. All that being said, if people aren't having a good experience, we do encourage you to let somebody know. And we act quickly when we hear any of those kinds of concerns. We encourage you to start with the department chair of the department teaching the class. And then if that doesn't yield a satisfactory response, to go to the dean of the college. But people can also write on that help request on the COVID website, or come directly to my office when necessary. And we do go back down through the process of deans and chairs and address faculty members when we identify problems, to make sure that we do everything possible to support effective instruction. We know it's important, and it is absolutely our priority to do everything possible to make sure that students are getting high quality instruction, even if it's not in the preferred modality.
Thank you for that answer. I have another question for you, Provost Heavey, this one being, when is UNLV going to create spaces with computers for students to participate in Zoom classes?
Okay, so the good news in this one is I think we have done that. And so we do have computer labs that are open where students can take their Zoom or WebEx classes. We also have the library, which is open using social distancing protocols, but people can either use their laptops in the library or use one of the library computers. And we've also set up additional classrooms where students can the rooms are open with desks set up, and then we have the university Wi-Fi available there. And so students can go into those classrooms and use those. And the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, Laurel Pritchard, is on the line here. Laurel, do you want to add anything to this question or the other one about supporting effective online instruction? Because she really leads these efforts for our team.
Sure. So hopefully you can hear me. It's a little busy where I am today. No?
We can't. Quiet.
Let's try that. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yes, we definitely do have, I believe it's 7 computer labs that are open on campus during the week. You can find a list of those on the coronavirus website, as well as a list of classrooms that are open where you can pick up some UNLV Wi-Fi to participate in your remote classes if you like. We've been very sensitive to that issue. We know students need places to participate in their classes. And regarding the quality of instruction issue, the Office of Online Education and the Office of Information Technology have been working extremely hard since last spring to help our faculty upskill, get up to speed with their online teaching skills. And we had over 600 faculty participants in training over the summer. And so we've really encouraged faculty to take advantage of those opportunities. But as Provost Heavey said, if you are feeling like your remote learning experience is not what you were expecting or not what you need to be able to learn effectively, it's really important that you let a department chair or a dean know about that so that we can reach out to that instructor and offer them some support so they have the tools they need to be able to be the most effective teacher they can be.
Thank you for that answer, Dr. Heavey and Dr. Pritchard. Next question being again directed at Provost Heavey. Why is the library and student union closed on the weekends? Why are we paying tuition to use facilities that we're not allowed to use on the weekends?
Okay, thanks. And encourage you to go and ask some of our other great panelist questions after this one, but I'm happy to certainly take this question. I think the way that I think about this is we are all trying to kind of balance competing issues here. And it is a challenge for us to operate the publicly facing spaces of the campus because of the vulnerabilities of the staff of the university. And so the library is open essentially 6 days a week, only not on Saturdays. And that's basically to give the staff of the library 1 day of a breather, because they have many staff who are in vulnerable categories who cannot be in the public facing spaces at all. And so while everyone is kind of struggling with all of the different pressures that have arisen from this, one of them is that the in-person staffing on the campus is dramatically reduced in those spaces. And so the same is true of the student union as well. And so those buildings are open most of the days of the week, but not 7 days a week, unfortunately. And I know we're all looking forward to the day when we can get back to regular staffing and everyone can feel safe being in the campus environment. And I apologize for the inconvenience for people who want to use them on those days. It turns out on the days they're closed, the usage, had been very minimal. And so we judge those to be the least disruptive days to close those facilities.
Thank you for that, Provost Heavey. Just a few more questions in this section, all directed at you, Provost Heavey, and then we'll ask the other panelists some questions. But the next one being, a few students have asked if they'd like to know when if in-person math tutoring will be available for spring semester.
Okay, well, our dear friend, Dr. Brian Labus, who is the epidemiologist for Southern Nevada and the campus, will tell us that unfortunately at this time we cannot do that. And so we do not anticipate in-person math tutoring being available during the spring semester. That's one of those activities that's a close proximity issue, and we don't think that's a safe modality. So we do not anticipate that for the spring, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. The next question is a little bit more in line with the online instruction again, but this one's specifically towards STEM courses. How is the university leadership investigating low average scores across the board in STEM courses?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And so President Whitfield and I also had a conversation about this issue. And it's a question of we are very concerned about passing rates for classes. And so we actively monitor what we consider D, F, and W withdrawals or incompletes from classes to make sure that we don't have classes that have high rates of performance that indicates essentially not passing or not being able to use it as a prerequisite by getting a D or an F. That being said, some instructors write exams where the average scores can be low, but then they curve the exams. And we're having a dialogue about whether or not that's a best practice. But if the curving of the exam leads to passing rates being adequate, we don't immediately flag that as problematic, because that becomes sort of an issue of the strategy of testing that's used in classes. And so, one of the things, and I'll let Dr. Whitfield comment on this one as well, as when you get a PhD in something, you can write an exam that everyone gets 20% on, or the average is 20% or the average is 80%, depending on how hard the questions are on the exam. And as long as you use a curving, then you can get an appropriate grade distribution. In some ways that might not be optimal because people might be discouraged by that low performance, but it's a matter of a little bit of debate within the academic disciplines. And President Whitfield, do you want to add your thoughts on that topic?
Sure, you covered it actually very well, Provost Heavey. And I think you hit on one of the critical pieces that I think we're going to figure out some way to have some conversations with some of our STEM professors, which is the idea that, designing a test that you well know that there could be a very low, success rate in terms of the number of correct answers that one gets, to make sure that the faculty member is really thinking about, does this show the efficacious nature of how you're teaching the class? And that also, I think the point that Provost Heavey raised, which was about, does this encourage or entice your students to be interested in the subject? There's a little bit of motivational sort of factor that's there. I will say, and I'm sure I'm channeling the provost to say that one of the things that we do our best to do, and that is to protect academic freedom, that our instructors really are experts in their field, and that there's a fine line that we don't want to cross in terms of them being the experts in terms of the content, but making some suggestions and encouraging and even just reviewing. We have very, very smart faculty who really are committed to the success of our students. And I think he and I have just kind of talked about this. We're in such weird times. I think if we were in more normal times, we might hold, like a summit or something in the springtime to talk to faculty and just lay out some of the things that happen, share some other best practices, so that we could make sure that we encourage our faculty to continue to do the best job that they can, as well as encouraging you all to make sure that you're aggressively pursuing success in those STEM courses. So maybe that's probably all I have to add about that.
Thank you for those answers. Provost Heavey, this question has kind of been touched on a little bit already, but when will in-person labs be offered again?
Well, again, to talk about Brian Labus, we consult. The great thing about being a research university is we have world-class experts who are advising us, and Brian being at the head of that line, about how to operate safely. And the reality is, the answer is not in spring 2021, and we're not sure after that, because we're going to have to watch the rollout of the vaccines to see what the timeline is for us getting to a place where we feel we can operate with greater density and less social distancing required while still maintaining adequate safety. So I think the most optimistic scenario is fall 2021. And there's some reason to believe that it might even be a little bit after that, depending on how long it takes for vaccines to get out.
Cool, thank you for that. Another question that I think has kind of been touched on a little bit in reference to COVID, but how are study abroad programs being affected by COVID?
Well, that's an easy one. Basically, we have canceled study abroad. So right now there is no study abroad happening, and until further notice.
Perfect. And the last question I have for you in this section being, will having online classes be more accessible for students, or will there be limited seats? Meaning, will there be a greater chance that more students will have online classes?
Well, why don't I hand that one to our Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, Laurel Pritchard. She manages, as I said, the online education and scheduling. So Laurel, you want to take that one?
Sure, happy to. That's a great question. We know that having access to the courses you need to be able to move through your degree program and graduate on time is extremely important. And we do work in partnership with the registrar's office and the Office of Decision Support to provide data to departments to help them understand which courses they may need more seats in. And often there is a perception that departments should just add more and more seats to the online sections of courses because there's no physical limitation to how many students you can put in an online course in the way that there is when you have a classroom. However, we do know that there are best practices in terms of teaching online. And for example, we don't recommend section sizes larger than 60 for online courses because it's actually more work for the faculty member to moderate discussions online than it is in person. Grading exams can become quite burdensome if there's a large enrollment in an online course, giving feedback on written assignments, et cetera. So departments need to take those things into consideration as well. This is not to say that departments aren't allowed to offer sections larger for online courses, but we do want to make sure that the student experience is preserved to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you for that answer. With that being said, that concludes our academics and online instruction section. I'm now going to pass it off to Nicole for the next section.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Josh. Just to introduce myself, my name is Nicole Thomas, and I'm the GPSA secretary. So I'm going to be asking questions in terms of the response to COVID-19, as well as fees, financial aid, and accommodations, and then passing it back to Joshua for campus safety and social justice. So starting off with our response to COVID-19, I'm going to open this up to everyone, whoever would like to take this answer. Is UNLV considering any options to host an in-person graduation? If sporting events, including UNLV football, are deemed safe, why have graduations been deemed unsafe? Could smaller college-level ceremonies be considered? Why couldn't a large venue, such as Raiders Stadium, be utilized to allow for social distancing?
President Whitfield, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, you want to try to throw me some tough ones, Chris, because you had so many back-to-back. But I really hope that Brian actually jumps in on this as well. We do understand the disappointment about not being able to have graduation in person. Understand, we've all graduated multiple times. We know that it's a special event, and we're working very, very hard to have a virtual one be as much of something that is a celebration that acknowledges the incredible achievement that you've made as we can. The comparison to those other things, I think, is a bit different. And actually, I'd say just recently, because of the changes in COVID, we have eliminated having fans at our sporting events. I think we were able to do it before because we were in these very large stadiums and we limited the number of people severely. Trying to limit the people that graduate for our graduation, there would have been no fair way to be able to do it. It's a fair way that would have also been able to allow us to be safe. And so I think that's what's behind all of that. Brian, is there anything you can add to that perspective?
Well, to me, it's really an issue of numbers. When we had the UNLV football game approved, the first thing the governor said was we could do 10% of a large venue. And with over 60,000 seats, we said, oh, we can have about 6,500 people there. But then working through all of the other restrictions, we had to limit that to 2,000 because of where bathrooms were and things like that. And then the rules changed again. And the health district said, well, we want you to back that down to 1,000. So we did that. And then a few days later, the health district said, on second second thought, let's get rid of fans altogether because it's just not safe right now. The problem is we just don't have a venue large enough for those sorts of things. If you think about having several thousand graduates, that's going to be bigger than any of the venues we could use in town under the best situation. And then none of the family members would be able to come, or we'd have to have 20 graduation sessions and all that. It's just a very difficult thing to do. And even when you do those things, we're bringing a lot of people together. And so there is a risk of disease transmission when that happens. There's no simple way to spread out that many graduates in the building. Unfortunately, it's just something we can't do because of the pandemic right now.
Thank you all for those answers. Our next question will be for Brian Labus. Data on UNLV's website suggests that there has been an increase in infections on campus. Can you provide more information about these statistics?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We have seen an increase. I think 2 weeks ago, our numbers were about 40 cases reported that week. The previous weeks to that, we were seeing in the low 30s. It dropped again last week. Basically, what we're seeing in our numbers is a reflection of what's going on in Southern Nevada. We're not seeing any increased transmission on campus. We're basically just seeing whatever happens in the community. So if the numbers go up in the community, like they have been for the past 5 or 6 weeks, the numbers climb a little bit on campus. And they haven't really climbed all that much. We're still seeing about half the number of expected cases in our student population. We haven't seen any clusters since we had a couple of parties at the beginning of the semester that were a bit of a problem. We had a few cases there, but we haven't seen any events or gatherings or classrooms or places on campus that have led to increased disease transmission. So even though we're seeing a slight increase in our numbers, it's really just because we're in Southern Nevada and Southern Nevada has been seeing an increase in the numbers overall.
And if I could jump in and maybe ask Brian, yeah, you got to watch smart people, boy. They can tell you stuff, and then you got to get your head around it. You said something that was very important, which is that what we would expect from our population, we're lower than that.
Yes.
And that's the idea that, you know, there are these certain rates based on what's going on in the city that we would expect happening with people connected to our campus. And we're about half of what that expectation would be. And I think the point to bring back home here is that that's because you guys are doing best health practices. That is the only reason why we are doing so well. And, you know, I'm not trying to pit us up against every other campus, but I mean, comparatively speaking, as a campus, we are doing very, very well. So please, you know, take that as a badge of pride of that we need to keep doing those health behaviors because we show that it actually has an impact.
Thank you both for that. Speaking of public health behaviors, are there any updates on how long masks will be required and if they may not be required outside anymore?
Well, we've required the masks since even before the governor mandated them because that is the best way to stop disease transmission. It's the way to keep people safe on campus. And so the rules right now are if you're around other people, you need to wear a mask. And that's why we have them both indoors and outdoors. It's difficult to keep people apart as you leave classes. Everybody's outside all at the same time. And that's why we have those same outdoor rules on masks. I hate it when I'm on campus and I have to do it, but it's just something we have to do because you never know when you're going to come across people. You know, you're walking down the sidewalk and somebody rides a bike or a skateboard right by you. Now you have two people in close contact and they need to be wearing masks. So basically all we can do is react to what is going on with the virus itself. And right now, you're seeing more and more mask mandates around the country, more encouragement to wear masks, not less. And so at some point when we start to see a reduction in disease and we get a vaccine that's available, then we can start talking about getting rid of the mask mandates. But for now, those are going to be with us for quite a while.
Thank you, Dr. Labus. Our next question is for you as well as Provost Heavey. Is there any chance that classes would return to in-person sessions if a COVID-19 vaccine is available to the public by the spring semester?
You want to start, Brian?
Sure. I think let me talk about the schedule of when the vaccine will appear, and you'll see why spring semester is unrealistic. So right now, the vaccines are still undergoing the clinical trials. We've heard some good news in the last week about a 90% efficacy and a 95% efficacy of the two vaccines, but they're still finishing up the trials and collecting all the safety data. They have to put that all together, give it to the FDA, and then get it approved. And so say that happens around the beginning of the year, we then have to roll out a massive vaccination campaign nationwide. The vaccine's not going to show up all at once. It's going to be limited at first to the frontline healthcare workers. And college students who are at the lower risk for hospitalization and death are going to be kind of at the end of the line, unfortunately. So even though the vaccine will start to become available in the spring semester, it will not be widely available until after the spring semester is over, unfortunately. So with that, we probably won't be able to do anything. The other thing to consider is the two vaccines that are being approved, they're 2-dose vaccines. You have to get them 30 days apart, and then you have to wait another week. So that's 5 weeks from when you're vaccinated until you're protected. And again, that hurts that timeline of being able to do that in the spring semester.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we're all deeply, empathic to this frustration and the impatience that is going on here. We all want to be past this. And this is the time where we just have to, as President Whitfield said in his opening remarks, and Brian emphasizes to us all the time, is we have to just understand that we're operating on virus time and just be patient. This is our trial to get through, and what we want to do is get through it safely as a community, so that everyone who's with us now is with us at the end of this ordeal when it's over. So we're sorry that we don't have better news on it, but it is the news we have.
Thank you both. I have one more question in terms of COVID-19, and this is for Dr. Labus as well as Dr. Davidson. Why is surveillance testing not being conducted in the residence halls? I'm not sure if this is a legal issue or a funding issue. However, other universities have implemented these measures recommended by health prevention experts.
Jamie, do you want to start or do you want me to?
Why don't you start, Brian?
Okay. Well, of course, there's always funding issues with things, but right now you could actually just go over to Thomas Mack and get tested every single day if you wanted to. What we've been seeing in our residence halls is very little disease transmission. We have not seen a situation where there have been large outbreaks or anything like that. I think we've done a very good job of reducing disease transmission on our campus. So it's not something we're really fighting right now in the residence hall. The other thing to think about is testing programs don't work as well as people think they do. Everybody wants to say, oh, I got tested, now I'm clear. Well, the sensitivity of the testing is somewhere between 70 and 80%, which means it misses 20 to 30% of the cases. So even if you have a lot of people testing negative, that doesn't mean they're actually negative, and you still have to do all of the same steps to protect everybody with mask wearing and social distancing, even with a testing program. So it really doesn't change all that much. And the other thing to think about with UNLV is we are a commuter campus. We don't have a lot, we don't have 15,000 people show up in the fall and live in the dorms and apartments right next to campus. So we approach things a little differently with people living in the community. That surveillance testing isn't as useful really in our situation.
Yeah, just to add to what Brian said, I think it almost gives a false sense of security, just because it's really hard to tell if you're getting a false negative, and you can take the test and then be exposed 10 minutes later, and now you have it. And the things that we know work best are the things that we are doing on campus, and that's requiring individuals to wear masks, to social distance. So we're going with the gold standard of protecting individuals. So we're focusing on what works.
Perfect. Thank you both. Now we're moving on to fees, financial aid, and accommodations. Our first question will be for Provost Heavey as well as Dr. Juanita Fain. Why are we being charged more per credit to take classes online when some classes were not being given the option to take in person? And could you also expand upon what the distance education fee entails?
Yes, so the distance education fee is a long-standing fee that was approved by the Board of Regents many years ago after consultation with students, and it was basically designed to support the infrastructure that we need for effective online instruction. It supports all of the back end, including the technology, the Canvas shell, all of the things that are laid on top of that shell, as well as the human infrastructure that support online instruction. And as Vice Provost Pritchard said earlier, including the many types of training that we offered in the hundreds of faculty trainings that were given this past summer. It's generally, a lot of times people think that online instruction should be less expensive, but in fact, it's more expensive because it requires a lot of additional infrastructure. It's not just a faculty member walking into a classroom that was built many years ago and delivering a class. It all has to be, done through the network and through backed up by a lot of technology. So we appreciate the fact that it's unfortunate that those costs are borne by students, but there's essentially no other system of covering those costs right now. We did waive that fee for last spring for all classes because they moved online suddenly. And we even waived it for the summer and the fall because students were already registered in those classes. For the spring, students are registering in the classes that are created as being online. And so they're registering before the modality of the course was changed. And so that fee will be levied for the spring courses. And, again, we'll make sure that we're using those fees to support effective online instruction. And we are trying to provide as much financial aid as possible in order to support students who are high need so that they can cover those fees. In the fall, we did an additional distribution of $100 to about almost 10,000 students to help cover those fees. Actually, that was mostly designed for the surcharge. Sorry, different additional fee. And I think people will be happy to know that the Board of Regents on Friday did indicate that they don't anticipate extending the student surcharge that was put in place this year. So we think that fee will go away, but the distance education fee will be there. Vice Provost Pritchard, do you want to say anything more about that before we hear from Dr. Fain?
Just that we are very careful in our stewardship of the funds that we collect from the distance education fee. And it does support technology and staff, who in turn support online teaching. And we did, because of the very rapid transition to remote instruction, have unfortunately somewhat of an inequity where the fee was being charged for courses that had been planned to be taught online all along. And there were courses for which the fee was not collected, but those courses were using all of the same infrastructure and technology and staff that the courses that were planned for online instruction were using. But we are mindful of that cost to students, and we do use those funds to ensure that online instruction is as high quality as it can possibly be.
Thank you. The only other thing I would add, this is Juanita Fain, is that, again, I mentioned earlier the how we can help form. If there are issues in terms of need for financial support to cover some of the fees, please complete that form and we'll do everything we can to, to assist you. The other thing I would mention, it's not a fee for the courses, but we did for fall and we will for spring reduce the student life facilities fee by $50. It was $225 and we reduced it to $173. Knowing that we are still providing programs and services, we wanted to indicate as a gesture that we understand the financial burden that you're experiencing.
Yeah, and we'll just add that we did give out in the spring more than $11 million of funding directly to students through the CARES that was provided to the university for the CARES Act, and that went directly into students' pockets. We are all hopeful that there'll be a second round of support from the federal government that will allow us to provide additional financial aid to students.
Thank you all for those answers. Our next question is for Dr. Fain. Dr. Fain, there used to be a tuition waiver for students who were members of local Nevada tribes because UNLV is built on Southern Paiute land. and as a way to help education be more accessible to Native students, among other reasons. I want to know when we can reestablish this waiver in order to help the students of local Nevada tribes to be able to afford UNLV and to do well because they don't have to worry about how they are going to afford university.
Thank you, Nicole, for that question. I really appreciate that question, and it's something that's very dear to my heart and quite frankly frustrating. The tuition waiver for Native American students is not an issue that the University of Nevada, Las Vegas can determine. It's a system-wide issue. And since 1992, when this subject first came up, so it's not a new issue, there have been different legal interpretations of whether or not that fee could be waived or not. And so initially, the guidance was that it could be raised, and then in, I think about 2007, it was rescinded. And I want you to know that UNLV has been a champion and try to get that changed. That has not happened to date. But what we have done, and it doesn't address the issue totally, but what we have done is we do provide the American Indian Alliance, that's our Native American faculty, with grants to assist students, Native American students who they know need assistance. We know that certainly does not address the broader concern, but just to know it's something that we care about, and we'll continue to try to get that changed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fain. I have a couple more questions. Let's see, this one will be for Steve McKellips in financial aid. So my mom lost her job due to the pandemic in 2020, and we are struggling to get by. But my FAFSA shows that I get no aid next year due to her 2019 taxes. What will you be doing to help students who have had a severe change in circumstance and are not able to pay like they used to?
Well, thank you very much, Nicole, for the question. I certainly do understand the circumstances, and I empathize for students who are in that situation. The person who wrote this question is certainly not alone. It's important to identify that a couple years ago, the federal government changed the financial aid process to what they refer to as a prior year for the ability to manufacture financial aid packaging in a little bit more of a convenient way as far as gathering information. However, it was true before then, and it's been true since, that the recognition that sometimes statuses change really provides an opportunity for the institution to adjust the financial aid packaging information with some additional discovery and information. So there is a form that we have called a special circumstances appeal form, where the student can basically say, my situation's different. And within that process, they'll need to document in what ways it's different, much like was alluded to in the question, but certainly other circumstances would fall into the category of what might be different. The reason I bring that up, the form is required because we become the proxy of the federal government. The federal government helps determine how much an expected family contribution might be. We're authorized to function like an agent to then modify their calculations. So we'll have to provide the documentation and then upload that back to the federal government to confirm our decision. But we then become the agents of the federal government in that capacity. That form is available every year. They're in the process of delivering that form now. Usually that form comes out right around the end of the calendar year, right about the time new taxes come out. But for circumstances where we're in the current year, we can use pay stubs or any other type of proof to associate the fact that the circumstances may have changed. So students should be able to reach out to the form. You should be able to grab it online. Or just simply ask in the Student Services Center and the Self-Service Center to just simply say, what do I do? Or we can deliver that information to you. But there is a process specifically for that. Admittedly, it is for those whose circumstances have changed based on the last information we received through the application.
Perfect, thank you so much. Our next question is for Dean Korgan. Is there any last-minute financial aid for graduate students in the spring 2021 semester, especially for those who are starting in the spring and didn't get the year-round aid that is typically offered?
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm happy to address that, and thank you for moderating this. Yes, so I'm glad someone asked this question because it's incredibly important. We have, as you've heard from other speakers, grave concern about the financial well-being of our graduate students, and we really don't want this, unique situation that we find ourselves in and the challenges our students are facing to prevent graduate students from continuing on in their programs and completing their programs. So with respect to financial aid, as you just heard from my colleague, Steve McKellips, financial aid does have a system in place that I think he can address for students to appeal if their circumstances have changed, or to ask for additional aid if they are in need. So I'm going to hand this to Steve to address that part of the question. But I also want graduate students to know that we have an emergency relief fund. So when COVID hit last spring, we recognized an immediate need and were overwhelmed with requests in our emergency retention grant requests. And so we have given about $250,000 above and beyond the CARES funding to students since that time. And we have funding that should last for the remainder of the school year. So I strongly encourage graduate students who are in financial need to go into their Grad Rebel Gateway and simply apply for an emergency retention grant. And we'll be using our emergency relief funds to support those requests and support our students through this time. And we're especially paying attention to the housing situation because we know the CDC guidelines extend until December 31st to protect renters who have been unable to pay their rent. We want to make sure that when and if that changes, our graduate students have a means to request funding to support themselves. So apply for the emergency retention grants and see our friends in financial aid. Steve.
Indeed. Thank you, Kate. One of the things that is a little bit tough when you see a question like this is to figure out what the right answer is for all individual circumstances. So there are a couple options that I guess I wanted to point to here. First of all, as I mentioned in the previous question, there is a special circumstance appeal grant for those individuals who've gone through the financial aid process and their circumstances are different than was previously determined. That appeals process will allow us to make the changes relevant to the current state rather than the predicted state from the FAFSA at the time it was first submitted. We also have students who have made the decision for whatever reason at the fall not to have applied for financial aid, who are now in different circumstances and may wish to. Please know that the financial aid application remains available to students who are pursuing interest in the spring. Whether you went through the financial aid process in the fall or not, you're certainly able to go through and put in an application at this point for the spring semester. There's no conditional nature to the assumption that you had to have financial aid in the fall to be considered for the spring. The process remains the same. The reason that's significant is because if you did not receive aid in the fall and are now trying to receive aid in the spring, sometimes some of those resources might be expanded because you did not take it in the previous semester. But then the third thing that I wanted to point out is, as I point people back to the financial aid application, it is important to identify that today, literally in the middle part of November, there are two FAFSAs available. There's one for the aid year 2021, and then there's one for the year starting 21 and 22. So one of the things that happens at this time of year is people go fill out the financial aid application and inadvertently fill out the wrong one. So I just wanted to identify that as we're approaching the spring 21 semester, they would fill out the application that was for the 2020 and 2021 school year. If you're interested in next academic year, the one that starts fall of 21 and then spring of 22, there is a specific FAFSA that remains available now for that year as well. The reason I bring both up is because if you're in a situation where you feel as though you're trying to receive as much aid as possible now and would likely want to receive aid again in the next year, it is prudent to recognize that we'll need to do both of those FAFSAs. So while one may feel late in the school year now, we would ultimately be almost as early as you could possibly be for the next academic year. So I just wanted to identify that those applications remain available, but people are often surprised that two are available at the same time.
Perfect, thank you both. Before I pass it back to Josh, I actually have a couple questions regarding campus life. So these will be directed to Dr. Renee Watson. Will registered student organizations be able to meet in person? And if they're unable to meet in person, what opportunities will RSOs have to reach out to incoming students and give them info on how to join meetings online?
Well, thank you, Nicole, for the question. So the spring semester will look similar to the fall semester related to the restrictions. Students can also go to the Involvement Center to post their events and to also explain details about those upcoming events. And there'll also be an involvement fair in the spring so that students can learn more about the organizations that we have.
Perfect, thank you. And I have a follow-up question for Dr. Watson, as well as Josh, if you'd like to jump in and answer this due to it being related to CSUN. So what is CSUN using their event sponsorship budget for now that there's no in-person events for the rest of the year and next semester? Why can't this money be used to cover the new distance education fees that have been added to remote classes?
I can answer that question, Dr. Watson. So currently the freed up sponsorship funds, have been used to provide more assistance to the following organizations/entities. UNLV CSUN Preschool, the Intersection Cares Emergency Fund, and the Undocumented Network. And we're continuing to work on other organizations that maybe serve more marginalized communities to make sure that they are getting the support that they need during these these very hard economic times. CSUN also purchased earbuds for the library to hand out to students so that they would still be available for use during the pandemic. We're also planning on doing a reallocation of funds so that the remaining funds will most likely go to student org funding, as well as even more scholarships. And we're looking at starting up a mini grant program next semester where students can apply for mini grants for things like required background checks, pre-professional school tests, examples being the GRE and the LSAT, etc., conference travel, and many more.
Thank you, Josh. I'm really proud of you all. Final question for the group from me is, given the need to maintain a balanced budget in Nevada legislature, how does UNLV and NCHE expect state funding for education will change? How might the university compensate for a deficit in public-based funding in the upcoming semesters?
President Whitfield, do you want to take that one?
You know, is Jean on the phone?
No, Jean is not in this meeting.
Why don't you take a stab at that one? I was trying to follow the wording for it, and just to understand that, I'll just preface you by saying, one of the things that we do is we design our budgets. We think about what's going to be best for the student first, and then we work backwards from there about the costs that we incur. You know, the university is just about $1 billion enterprise, and it has a lot of facets to it. But just remember that our ultimate goal really is providing an opportunity for you all to get a world-class education. But there's so many little details to it. That's why I have a fantastic provost who helps to keep track of some of those. But share some of your thoughts too, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thanks for that question. And like it is for so many families, it's also a financially difficult time for the university. And we are having to dip into our so-called savings. The good news is that the university has accrued over the years appropriate, what we wouldn't consider overly large, but appropriate reserve funding. And the system has released that funding to the campuses. And so prudent fiscal management over those years has put UNLV in a pretty good place to weather the current decrease in state funding for at least the current few years by just implementing a hiring freeze and not filling vacant lines. So we do have over 600 vacant positions as a campus. And so there are some units that are straining under the weight of those vacancies, but the savings that's accruing for those, along with the reserve funding that is essentially being used up to fill the hole in state funding, will allow us to proceed with what we anticipate to be no layoffs on the campus for this year or the next biennium, even if we do sustain a 12% cut in our state funding. And so just to give you a little bit of the scope of the magnitude here, we're this year alone have a $50 million reduction in our state support. And we expect over the next biennium to have something like an additional $70 million of decreased state support. And so we're feeling the strain. And this year we know that there was the student surcharge that was put in place for the $6 credit for undergrads and $8 a credit for graduate students, as well as faculty and staff are going to be experiencing furloughs for the second half of the year, where they experience a 4.6% reduction in pay. So this year, there's a lot of shared sacrifice going on to help meet those budget reductions or state funding reductions. Next year, we expect the surcharge for students to go away, as well as we hope the furloughs, but we're not totally sure because those are determined by the state. And then we'll rely on our reserve funds to get us through that period, and hopefully by then we'll get back to normal economic times, and the state will be able to restore the funding that was missed. We'll be able to fill some of those vacant positions. So good news is we'll get through it together. It will be a strain, but we'll be able to survive this crisis.
Thank you so much to you both. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Josh to address questions related to campus safety and social justice.
Thank you for that, Nicole. The first question being for Dr. Fain and Dr. Whitehead. Though the school often speaks about diversity and inclusion, when asked to describe diversity in regards to age, age is not included in the equation, even with about 20% of the undergraduate student body is at and over 24 years old. The members of the Alliance of Non-Traditional Students often report dealing with age discrimination and microaggressions from staff, faculty, and other students. How would you propose to address that issue?
I'll start, Dr. Whitehead, and just say that I think the first thing is to be aware that there is an issue and to acknowledge that that exists. And then I think, training and education is important, for our faculty and staff. And so I would encourage students who are experiencing what they believe is discrimination to let us know. And we certainly will try to address it to the best of our ability.
I mean, that's perfect, Dr. Fain. I think I would definitely add that that piece of what I think I really appreciate that Dr. Whitfield is doing right now is the listening sessions, right? When I mentioned that your voice matters, even though you may feel as though it's a single voice, is pretty mighty. And so making sure that you are involving yourself in the opportunities to let your voice be heard. I know CSUN has opportunities for students to amplify their voice, student diversity and social justice. We're here, as well as so many other colleagues. And so I think definitely we hear you, and I think there are a lot of things in place right now, honestly, to support students. And sometimes I think about its awareness that Dr. Fain was talking about and the access. And so one of the things that our office is doing is developing these cultural resource guides to centralize some of this information, right? And I think that's something that we could do better as an institution, is like thinking about these things and how do we create, like kind of how we address COVID, how do we do these for other entities and things on our campus to centralize it? And so the training is extremely important. And I know there's a move to have training to address implicit bias, some that exist already in HR and other places. ODI does trainings on implicit bias. So these things exist. I think it's a matter of really bringing awareness and centralizing the resources for students to have access to. And you mentioned being a part of the RSO, so you're already connected, really. You have, student involvement and activities that you can reach out. You should have an advisor. And so there are multiple touch points that you all can continue to make sure that your voices are heard. And I would tell you, I'm very impressed by my colleagues because they are really putting things in place to really support students during these times.
And I would add, Joshua, that I do think that we need to put more emphasis on what's considered, in quotes, non-traditional students and the specific needs that that they have. So I do acknowledge that that's an area that we need to address more directly.
And let me just add one piece onto what my colleague said, because I think that they nailed it in terms of how we're thinking about going forward. Through the listening session, but these are the folks on the front line that hear you every day, and just understand that we are hearing you and we are going to be responding. We're going to be designing a better university. And part of that designing, part of that movement forward means that you do work through, I think as Dr. Fain said, through those organizations that allows us to hear more of what's going on, because we can't be in every single corner of this massive university. But so understand that it is important to have your voice heard. I think that Josh said that a little earlier. And it's just very, very important that if you hear things going on, that you don't suffer in silence, that you actually share them, because we're committed to making a better university. And it's based on the feedback that we get from you all that we'll be doing that.
Thank you for those answers. The next question being, I guess, more of an open-ended question for whoever wants to chime in, but there's been a controversy, regarding the symbolism of Hey Reb. Will the mascot that has been a part of UNLV for decades be replaced, changed, or kept? A polling of students should be allowed to vote on whether or not to keep him as a school mascot.
I'm sure that my colleagues are expecting me to say something, so I will jump in on a controversy. I think it's so interesting because whoever provided that question is thinking the same way that I've been thinking. I'm coming to it with fairly fresh eyes and without years of bias that some other people have experienced. And I do think that we do need to have some conversation with the current students and also with our alumni as well, to hear what they think actually about it. I've been separating that out from learning the university, to focusing on that one specific piece of it, but I've been working with a couple of faculty, Nancy Lowe in particular from the College of Education, and we will be doing, I think we're going to do a survey, and then we're going to try to do some focus groups. I just want to be very transparent and share one of my perspectives, though. I do think about this as having a separation between the idea of being a rebel and Hey Reb, the caricature, because what I've heard is that it's the caricature of what represents the rebel is where the big issue is. I have shared in the past that I have been called all my career a rebel. So I don't connect the idea of the rebel with some of the concerns that we've had about the caricature. But the caricature, on the other hand, is something that I think I'm very curious to hear. Is it the hat? Is it the mustache? Is it because he's too short? I mean, what pieces of there are there? And if we come together as a community and think about going in a different direction, that it also should be actually the community that tells us what that future direction should be, so that we can feel like we're making it as inclusive as possible. But please remember, we're not all going to agree, and that's okay. But that if we have a strong inclination going one way or the other of creating something different, we are empowered to be able to make that change. And so we will be engaging in that. I want you all to focus on your studies for right now. Don't worry, it's not off the table. We will get to it.
Thank you for that answer, President Whitfield. The next question is actually directed towards Director Garcia. How will safety be monitored next semester, seeing as the dorms will be open, but a very large majority of the classes will be online? Are precautions being reduced, or is safety still a pressing issue, even with the lower population of individuals on campus?
First of all, Joshua, thank you very much for including me on this conversation. Nicole, thank you for your input as well, taking part in this. It means the world that you would come to us and specifically to me and get answers. So the short answer to your question is no. We've absolutely made no cuts within police services as it relates to what we're providing to campus. Actually, police services, the hiring of police officers is one of those groups in which we are exempt from the hiring freeze. Part of the reason for that is the lead time that we need in order to hire a police officer. So from the time somebody applies for a position to the time they actually are on the street working, we're looking at between a year and a year and a half. That's with training, with backgrounds, with the polygraphs, psychological, everything else that a potential police officer would have to go through just to get to that point. So we are maintaining what we have traditionally had on at UNLV's campus. The actualities, we've increased it. We have, as of Monday, the 23rd, we have 6 police officers who have now graduated from the field training program, and they're hitting the streets by themselves come Monday. We received a grant for about $350,000 for the hiring of 2 additional positions They will hit the street as well on Monday. They are residential, homeless outreach, residential life, and student liaison. So they are hitting the street as well. We're looking at this, and I know that this sounds contrary to what we're going through, because it seems like we've been in COVID for so long we don't remember what the old world was like, right? But there is an opening, there's still a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're anticipating that sometime in 2021 we're going to be back to quasi-normal, if not normal, hopefully in the fall or even sooner. And so we're not setting aside the safety of our students and our campus because we're in COVID. We're going full steam ahead.
And Josh, can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
So Rich Clark and I work specifically with housing. We work very closely with the University Police Services, and specifically Sergeant Summerlin, who is actually our liaison officer. And so we work very closely with her and other officers when things come up in residence halls. They work very closely with us with training. We also have our student housing security that is there after hours, and they rove the grounds. And then we also have resident assistants that do regular duty rounds, and professional staff. They're still in the residence hall. So there hasn't been a reduction in those areas. As a matter of fact, we have a very good working relationship with our police department. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that. With that being said, that kind of concludes our questioning for this town hall. I'm actually going to send it back to President Whitfield for some final closing remarks.
Thank you, Josh. And I think that this was an extremely informative session. I really hope that you have walked away with some answers to some very, very difficult questions. I think I speak for my colleagues in saying that this is challenging our ability to lead probably more than anything else in any of our careers. But we do it, and we do that leadership, we do that thinking, we do that planning with one ideal, and that is students first. Director Garcia just mentioned, the safety that he truly personally is passionate about providing for our students, and that if there's ever an issue, you can go to him and it gets resolved. I think you heard the same thing from our student affairs, from Dr. Fain, from Dr. Whitehead. I really want to give a shout out to, and I can't remember your name, that talked about financial aid. We know that that is not the way that we should be doing business. And we have been working basically ever since we found an error to be able to make that better. It's not perfect yet. It's Steve McKellips. McKellips. Thank you. Sorry about that, Steve. That takes, we know what you're experiencing. Know that we're suffering with you too. We don't like not being 100% perfect in everything that we do, but we know that this is a time that is challenging all of us. So make sure that you have patience with us. Actually, too, you've heard about the great things that we can offer. I think some of them maybe you didn't know about, but some of them were things that you're like, hey, wow, the university is there for me. Please, if you get an opportunity, say thank you to the people that are working very hard on your behalf, because this is a part of what makes us a community, of that you all have struggles, we recognize those struggles, and we work our best that we can to try to make them better. And the other piece of it is when you say thank you, you don't know how much your saying thank you will help the next person who comes along, because then we get excited. We go, we get it, they get it. Let's do more of this. So please understand that the times that you're having, we are there with you. And we talk and work long hours trying to figure out ways that we can make things better. But some of it we just can't make better. Some of this we have to say, I think the provost said it very adequately and accurately, that this is a COVID moment, that this is just COVID time and it works differently. Just understand that moment by moment, though, we're here as a community. I really want to give a shout out to CSUN, and particularly Josh's leadership on this, because you all being able to have a route to making sure that we know what's going on is critically important for us to be able to respond. That's how we work as a community, and that's how we will get through this. There will be a day when you all will look back and remember how long COVID lasted. Now you're looking forward, and it looks like the light at that end of that tunnel is just miles and miles away. But let's try to put this in perspective. We don't know the exact timing for when Josh or Nicole might get that COVID vaccine. But if we think it's going to be maybe May, think about it. We're about halfway through because we started back in March. That was about 8 months ago. We've got about 8 months more to go. I don't know if that depressed you or made you feel any better. But honestly, these days are better. I'm sure that you will agree. They're better when we work together. And keep letting us know what we can do better. And also give some shout outs. Like I want to give a shout out to our provost in particular. He was working on this well before the time that I got here. And none of those decisions were were easy, and none of them were done lightly. He has done an incredible job of thinking about how we can balance the safety of each and every one of our students, of our staff, and of our faculty, and at the same time being able to make sure it's this bigger goal of that we want to get you to a degree as quickly as we can, but as safely as we can. And so please understand, everybody that you saw on this webinar today is somebody that truly takes this job very, very seriously. And as time goes on, I'm going to put this on Josh. Hey, CSUN has my ear. I listen to whenever they call, I make sure that I listen to what they have to say, because there are things that we can try to address, and some of the problems we can solve. Some of it is out of our control, but the ones that we can do, we want to know about, and we want to be able to work with you to do. So please, as this upcoming holiday season comes about, I just want to say it again, find ways to try to be safe. You all know what the basics are. It's about masks. It's about social distancing. It's about washing your hands. Be leaders, both in your community and in your family and in your household. And let's try to be as safe as we can and beat this thing back until we get our vaccine. And then we go forward and do even more great things. I thank everybody so much for being here today, and I hope that you found it as valuable as I did. All right, take care.